Hello, aviators, and welcome back to the Pro Pilot Playbook podcast, where we bring you the tips, the tricks, the hacks, the shortcuts to get through your flying career in the fastest and the cheapest means possible. Today, you got me at the moment. Mike will be here shortly. I just filmed this real quick to kind of give a little intro to what's going on here. A couple weeks ago, we had recorded several questions back to back that we thought were going to be one podcast. And we ended up breaking it up. We were going to split it in half, and then we broke it up even more. So not only this week, but the week after, you'll see us wearing the same clothes in the podcast. It was just too long. We're trying to keep these things short so you can watch them on your way to work or on your way to the airport for your flight lessons. We just broke it up here a little bit. So it'll end up being 3 different podcasts total, the questions. But this week, enjoy what we have to talk about, to say about the gentleman who had the logbook that got ruined, and the gentleman who walked away from a helicopter crash. Well, I don't know if he walked away, but he's dealing with the post issues of the injury of the helicopter crash and how it'll affect his medical, and we tackle that this week. Anyway, here's the first one. This one comes from Stoney. Stoney looks to be in the Texas area. Hi, guys. I'm a huge fan of the podcast. I'm a private pilot with my FIR certificate. I think he meant to say IFR certificate.
Okay.
I'm looking into becoming an instrument flight instructor. I have around 200 hours total time. However, my logbook got ruined in the Harvey flooding in Houston. My first 40 hours were in that logbook. I have everything else recorded in a different logbook. I was wondering if you all could go over how logbooks are validated. The flight school that I started at no longer exists, so I don't know how to get those 40 hours back. Well, my first initial thought is you don't have to worry about it.
Right.
Because every time you fill out what they call an 8710 form for, which you have to do before you take a check ride, it goes over in detail your total flight time, airplane, single engine, land, your flight instrument flight time. It has dozens of blocks you fill out with detailed flight time. That stuff is on record at the FAA. And of course, the minimum hours to get your private pilot certificate is 40, which very, very rarely does somebody get it right at 40 hours.
Right.
When you got that first initial private pilot certificate, this was recorded. Okay. So,
right. They know that the designated examiner looks through your logbook and makes sure everything's fine.
Right.
So you wouldn't have gotten through that test, that
right.
private pilot's license without somebody taking a look at your logbook.
Right. So right there, you're covered.
Right.
Now, am I saying that you're not going to have an issue someday down the road sitting in an interview and you're explaining this story? It's possible you're going to get some knucklehead sitting across from you at an interview that doesn't necessarily like that. But as long as you show up with, whatever records, you can go over to your local FSDO. I'm sure you might be able to get it online somehow too. Just the fact that you have a private pilot certificate is enough. And then all the other certificates you're going to have, by the time you start applying somewhere, it's really going to be, it's not going to be relevant.
Not really, no. And, in fact, most of these corporate jobs, they really just look at your resume. They don't even really look at your logbook. And, a lot of people are going to electronic records. So there's lots of good programs out for electronic logbooks, but you could just convert all your records onto electronic. It's easier. You can carry it with you, all that stuff. And then just make one line item for your private pilot's license.
Sure.
Your total hours in there and everything. And then just from memory, do that. And then, if anybody asks in an interview or whatever, you just explain.
Right. When I went electronic, I've got, I don't know, over 10,000 hours. And when I went to electronic, I have several one-line items in my logbook. It's, Cessna 172 and tail number various.
Right.
And that is like that one line in that electronic logbook has 86 hours or something. Whatever. It's okay once you get to a certain point to do that. The other thing you could do, if you are really, really worried about it, I mean, you're not going to get specifics, but I know you said the flight school is closed, but surely, especially with this day and age of Facebook and all this social media stuff,
Right.
you could track down somebody from the school, or maybe you still have like some of your receipts. If you kept any of the receipts, it might show, on this day in July, you flew for 1.3 hours. You may be able to reconstruct some of it and then put that into a digital form if you were really concerned about it. But yeah, if there's guys that, maybe not shortly after they do their primary flight training, completely go digital with, ForeFlight offers it, free. They have
Yeah,
a
that's great.
great logbook,
Yep.
digital logbook. So I would not be concerned about it, especially since the first four. It sounds like you switched to a new logbook before you even finished your private pilot certificate. So that's even less reason to worry about it.
Yep.
And
Thank
then,
you for the question, Stoney. That's a really good
well,
question.
he actually goes on here. This is a good one too. He has a additional question. Completely different topic here, but I was also wondering, could you all go over a flight instructor's salary? Does it differ from school to school? Are instructors paid by the hour? If so, how much usually? I live in Houston, Texas. The airport I would want to work at is pretty busy. DWH. Anyway, yeah, the use the word salary is probably not accurate for a flight instructor's pay, although I'm sure it exists out there.
Yes.
Flight instructors are typically paid by the hour.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it varies. I mean, back when I was flight instructing, I think the school charged $15 an hour for a flight instructor, and I probably saw $8 an hour of it.
Oh man. Now mine was a lot better than that. I think we were 18 and then it went to 25. You're probably so a good way to figure out their salary is exactly what you just said. Look at so it's all billed. You're typically a 1099 employee. And you're not on any kind of salary or anything, and then it's all based off billable hours. Think of yourself like an attorney. So basically, if you look at your local flight school, and look, they'll have the cost of the airplane to rent, and then they'll have an instructor cost, and it'll maybe $30 or $35 an hour, whatever. Now the house gets some of that, not a ton, but like in your case, 50%. I was like, normally,
I don't remember. Maybe I got $12 an hour. I don't remember. It wasn't.
So if they're charging 30, the instructor's probably getting 70% of that or something like that. Now it's not just flight time. At least when I did that, it's also ground instruction time. So
Yep.
if you go fly for say 1.1 hours with a student, you actually would have a pre-flight briefing and a post-flight briefing. So you may bill that student for 1.5 or something hours, or even a little more than that. And then on days when it's raining, you may have them come in for one-on-one instruction on the ground, and you may bill them for that. So the actual hourly rate is not that bad. It's just if you go through a week of bad weather and no one's flying, like where I grew up in the Ohio Valley, man, it can be cloudy in November and 400 overcast for freaking 20 days straight. And then there's only so much you could go over on the ground. That can hurt you.
Or if you're an instructor out in the middle of Kansas or Nebraska or Iowa or somewhere where there's just not that big of a flow of students,
yes,
you may only have a student or two every couple of days. And that's not helping you either. That's why Mike and I are always telling people, not only from the weather aspect, but from the student aspect, get your butt into one of these high-end markets, like down in Florida or Arizona, something like that, where you are literally, they got more students than instructors because that's where everybody goes to flight train. The weather's good year round. And it's not just about how much per hour you're making. The huge variable there is when you show up to the airport, you got a full docket of back-to-back students that day to where you are making that $15, $20 to $25 an hour the entire time you're at the airport.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm looking at his airport here. I just looked it up because I've never been there. David Wayne Hooks Memorial, DHW, Houston, Texas. This is a really serious airport here. It looks like a feeder for Houston,
Okay.
7,000-foot runway. Gosh, probably 40 hangars here. This is a lot of 2 FBOs. This is a big deal. So, yeah, it looks like that's probably in a densely populated area. Houston, a lot of people there with a lot of disposable income. I bet that flight school is probably pretty busy there. So, yeah, he might be barking up the right tree there. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You can always go to Florida to one of those pilot mills or Arizona where they got hundreds of students.
Right.
They now a lot of those big schools pay less, but they got so much business. You're really
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the hourly rate, it's going to be all over the place. I mean, I think the little mom and pop school next to me, here in the suburb of Cincinnati, I think the
Yeah.
guys are making, $20 an hour, or maybe $25 an hour, and they charge 35 or something. But it's you, I mean, it's all over the board.
But here's the thing: you're getting paid to fly. It's one of your first things. I mean, I remember thinking doing that, and I was like, man, I'm not paying. I'm getting paid to do this. It's like, man, it's a lot of the times that normally you're paying to fly, which is even worse.
Right.
And then you think you hit the lotto when somebody lets you fly an airplane for free, like some hangar customer or something. Well, this is the reverse. Now they're paying you, so it's not all bad.
Yep. Yep.
Good. Well, stick with it, Stoney.
Yes. All right. We got another one here. This question is from Survivor 602.
Oh, I saw this one. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have his actual name, but that's the handle for his email
Right.
address, Survivor 602. And I think after I read this, we'll see why. Hey guys, I recently found your podcast and love it. Growing up, I remember seeing pictures of a plane my great grandpa built back in the 50s and always thought it would be cool to get my certificate and build an experimental. Just over 2 years ago, I was a sole survivor in an R-44 crash. That's a helicopter.
Just a helicopter. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little one of these little four-place helicopters, like where you see them all over the place is like in vacation areas, like down in Orlando, Florida, or wherever. These are the popular chopper they're using to give helicopter rides in.
Yeah.
Anyway, sole survivor in R-44 crash, 1,200-foot fall with no auto rotation.
Holy shit!
So that's a pretty good impact. I've lost a little movement in my leg due to the crash. Other than that, I'm really healthy physically and mentally. What are some disquals? And should I get a physical done before I contact an instructor? Thanks, guys, and keep up the great work.
Wow. I mean, my goodness, 1,200 feet. That's my first reaction. I'm like, my God, I'm on the 37th floor here looking down like that. Well, that's something. And it sounds like other people died in the crash. That's really, something. Yeah. But yeah. So I guess we can shoot from the hip here on what we know.
Right.
First thing I would say is absolutely you need to go to an aviation medical doctor. And just
we kind of recommend that anyway,
right.
early on, because that's one of the things we preach is in order to do this fast and cheap, you need to be at the airport a lot, moving fast, and you cannot solo, which is in the way we teach people to go through this thing. You're going to be soloing very quickly, and you can't solo until you get that medical anyway. And if there's any things that pop up on that medical, you need to make sure you get them resolved. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck. So, yeah, even more so in your case, Survivor 602.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, go see an AME and get your medical. Try to get a first class because that's what you're going to need to fly professionally, and work through them, and they'll help you through all of this. And it's only like $100 or whatever. This is not an expensive thing to get. So
Right.
You can just go on Google Maps, put an aviation medical examiner, find one near you, schedule an appointment, and go in there and talk to them about what happened. Now, a couple things that I can say that I just know over the years from experience and stuff. If you're on some pain management, like I know a guy's in a car crash and he's got some injuries as a result of that. If you're on pain medicine, that could be an issue. You can research that too before you go. You can Google the type of medicine that you're on and how that affects the FAA and all that kind of stuff. But that right away is a problem, you know.
Right.
No,
Yes.
I'm hoping, thank God, that he's doesn't have any chronic pain from this and that. But I have seen over the years people with problems, you know, with their leg. I have seen a person with a leg problem fly. And then we had a employee at a company that I worked at that had airplanes that flew a Cessna, and he was actually a glider instructor, and he was injured in a crash, and he was paralyzed from the waist down. He was in a wheelchair, and he could actually fly with specially designed foot controls in certain airplanes that he could use his hands for the rudders and things like that. So that sounds much more extreme than what this person has. But I
Right.
just,
But I mean, he's not going to be a professional pilot. And I mean,
no,
the
no,
guy
no.
you're talking about in the wheelchair,
Yeah,
there's no way he can.
right, right, right.
Yeah.
But one thing for all viewers that may have hit on this, that have an injury or something, and they're looking at this for the first time, I do want to stress, not professionally, but a lot of people have a love of flying, and they do have some sort of medical issue. They've got something bad wrong with them that just, you can't get around it. You can't get a medical. You can still fly with an instructor. And like we were talking about earlier, they're $20, $30 an hour. You know, you can't get your license and you can't solo, but if you just love to fly, and I know lots of people with medical conditions, they just pay that $30. It's a relatively low cost to pay relative to the airplane rental. So you can rent an airplane, go with an instructor and fly around and everything, as long as they're there. Or if you just have another pilot with you a lot of times.
Oh yeah. You know, and I've heard the story the other way too. Guys that had their pilot certificate, they had their private pilot's license. There was a passenger I had on the jet just a couple months ago. He even owned his own airplane, and you know, he was a instrument certificated pilot, and was what he had some type of injury, or it was a major surgery. What was the deal? And whatever, lost the medical, never went through the steps to reapply, and he just gave up on it. And I was telling him the same thing. I'm like, you know, you could still go fly, at least,
Yeah.
you know, grab a flight instructor, and don't lose this passion just because of that. And chances are, after, you know, time goes by, you could possibly get your medical back. But Survivor 602, the short answer to your question is, we don't necessarily know, because you could go see this AME, this medical examiner, and he may immediately say, well, first of all, when you fill out the application, you're going to have to put down, you know, what surgeries were involved, there's a whole gambit of stuff you're going to have to list. And that medical examiner may say, well, I got to submit this to the feds in Oklahoma City and see what they say. And they may come back and say, yep, you're good to go. Or they may come back and say, well, we need the patient to do this, 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 and this. And
Right.
once you do this, 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 and that, you're cleared to go, and you'll have your medical. But it's not an open and shut case, and it may not even be an open and shut case to the medical examiner either. He's going to have to probably submit paperwork to the feds.
Yeah. And one other new thing I just thought of that's very interesting that kind of relates to this. So there's a new license called the Sport Pilot License. Have you heard of this, Sean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a weight class of airplanes. It's lower than like a conventional Cessna, but there's companies now designing these planes that are lightweight if they're under a certain weight, and these are GA airplanes that you can buy and fly around and everything. If they're in this weight class, only a driver's license is required, no medical certificate. You still need a license to fly it, but so if you have a medical problem, but you still qualify for a driver's license, but can't qualify for an aviation medical, you can still buy your own airplane flying around. So that's really encouraging.
Right. Yeah. There's a whole class of airplanes that fit into this. And I think there's some rules in there of, you know, this is for somebody that wants to just fly. I think you can't have more than one passenger. You got to stay within 50 miles of the airport you took off from. It has to be day VFR.
Right.
But yeah, it's definitely a cool option. They're basically trying to take the ultralight world and put a certificate on it.
Yeah. Yep.
Kind of.
Yep.
All right, but thanks for the question, Survivor, and good luck. And shoot us an email back. Curious what your AME ends up saying about the situation.
Yeah, right.
Maybe a non-issue, hopefully.
Yep.
All right, well, there you have it. Part 2 of these of the long question session. Thank you for tuning in. If you have a question you'd like us to answer here on the podcast, you can email us at podcast@propileplaybook.com. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.